Hello, welcome to the Baer Faxt Live from Hong Kong 2025. I'm Boliang Shen, Head of Content of the Baer Faxt. Today we are very honored to have my old friend and Executive Director and Curator of Parasite. For those who are not in Hong Kong, Parasite is a leading non-profit contemporary art space in Hong Kong and also one of the oldest and the most active independent art institution in Asia. I think it was founded almost 30 years ago, and this year is Billy's third year in Parasite in this role. And during the course of these 3 years, what is the most impressive changes in the local art system for you?
Thank you. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be part of this conversation. And I guess I'm representing the kind of non-profit sector in Hong Kong, but also in the region in Asia. And I joined 3 years ago as the director, and it was really just the tail end of COVID, so we still had restrictions about the number of people that could gather together, so we couldn't have like mass events at the time. I literally came out of quarantine, I think it was 5 days, and then straight into the art week. So it's exactly like 3 years to this moment in a way. So that's, and I think since then, the world has become a bit more polarized, but at the same time, simultaneously with Hong Kong opening up, a lot of the momentum in the early years when I was the director was about reconnecting, how to think about expediting those connections from abroad, and I think that was reflected a bit in the program. We probably will talk about that a little bit later. And then I think since last year we had, for example, our traditional brunch event, which was a really kind of nice moment where we had queues around the block, for example. And we saw this in many other performances and other events across the city as well. So there's this kind of momentum, and I think this year we're excited about how to continue this. The world seems to be even more complicated at the moment, and we're seeing a lot of people actually really flock to Hong Kong as well, more than I think it's just been building the momentum of that.
And talking about the flock of people going to different events and during the art week, I know this year Parasite has lots of exhibitions and events, and also curated the film sector of Art Basel Hong Kong. But first I want to ask, prior to a part of all this, what does Art Basel Hong Kong and the Hong Kong Art Week mean to you, and as the director of Parasite, what's your priorities during the Art Week?
Yeah, I mean, it's super fascinating. It could be also a subject of a very substantial research for a PhD, I think. But I mean, I think in a nutshell, you can really see kind of Hong Kong's cultural sector and the region pre Art Basel and then post. And I think to summarize what one of the kind of key engines that has driven a lot of development and also an increased diversification of this ecosystem that includes the commercial and the non-profit. Has been more people from around the world coming to the region, being more interested and engaged with the culture from here as well. And Art Basel, I think, because of it's able to do this, to draw much needed visibility, it's really benefited the wider ecosystem, including Parasite, where we started in 1996, just before the handover period, from a very modest background, artist founded, to now where we are a very robust non-profit organization that has income streams from government supported level, but also increasingly so from private sources as well, which has enabled us to have a super exciting program, also to support a very talented team of curators, for example. So I think that's something where now, in this moment of the Art Week, we also have 2 exhibitions we're very happy to share for colleagues and a wider audience from abroad. And we have this brunch actually tomorrow that we're excited about, which is a brunch with a twist. It has a Parasite kind of style to it, always putting the artist first, and it will be a premiere of a new performance by Ming Wong, with cameos from Li Minshu and Inti Guerrero.
Yeah, I was impressed when seeing the press releases of all the events, because you have a solo exhibition of the Hong Kong-based artist Wing Po So, and another group exhibition called How to Be Happy Together, curated by Zai Rongxiang, who is a curator and a scholar based in mainland China. And also you mentioned the performance by Ming Wang, is a Singapore artist based in Berlin. And also just in our last session we had with Annie Cui, and the arts editor of South China Morning Post, we talked about the Hong Kong identity, which is quite different from both the mainland China art system and also the Western system. And as a curator, you have a strong experience in mainland China as a curator, and also with a very strong international background. So how do you respond and navigate to the complexity actually here in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I mean, I think for many curators as well, myself included, we're all almost third cultural kids of this generation. We're influenced from culture that we're situated within, but also from perhaps somewhere from afar. And I think with the program, for example, and the idea of Hong Kong identity, it's really to embrace what is unique about Hong Kong for me, which is this transnationalism. It's really being somehow in a situation of between many things, how to embrace that much more fully. Sometimes it can be often reduced to cliches. Often there's a descriptor of like East meets West, and sometimes also the relationship with mainland China and Hong Kong. But I think Hong Kong and China as well, and the region as well, is much more complex than this, and it's defined by a much more fluid idea of migratory histories and identities. And for us, the job is to really celebrate and to amplify that even more. So for example, with our current show, as you mentioned, How to Be Happy Together, it's taking a conversation from this complex understanding of Greater China, which is very fluid in and of itself, with the other side of the world, Latin America. And from this, we can introduce historical voices to a younger generation. And downstairs, we will have a smaller space that's much more focused, which is also, so the group show is a way to bring together lots of different artists. It could be existing works. Downstairs is something new. So it's a commission that really helps to give a breakthrough for an artist. It happens to be this artist is born and raised here. But she's exhibited elsewhere before, but it's a nice moment because of that proximity that we have, that we can do something much more ambitious.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that the group exhibition deals with something about I think that both exhibition deals something about the fluidity of nationality, of gender, of culture, and of body actually. So I think it really tells a different story from the major narrative, both art history and the cultural history. Yeah, I do think also, I also noticed it is becoming, those topics becoming global topics. I think in all the museums, everywhere, people take those topics which used to believe as the marginal groups, but now we are revisiting the legacies and also the current state of it. So within Hong Kong, do you think the local art community, their needs is also changed within this global context?
Yeah, that's a very complicated question, a complex question, I would say, in terms of the needs changing, because on one hand, I think, we mentioned this kind of pre-Art Basel kind of timeline perhaps, and then kind of post, where, I mean, perhaps in the early period of time, it was a strong hunger and need to be visible from abroad, to be heard, the voices to be heard, and so forth. I think now it's perhaps a bit more nuanced because of globalization, with the internet as well, information being much more readily available. You don't have to see an exhibition sometimes to get a sense of things and to follow from afar.
Interesting.
But I think the difference is, I mentioned a bit about the idea of proximity. So it wasn't only because, for example, So Wen Po is from Hong Kong that we invited her for this new commission. But it does have its benefits that we have this proximity. Our team can, on a daily basis, check into the studio, like look at progress and kind of edit and help kind of encourage the directions. So I think part of the wider emphasis maybe of this need that you're talking about is to also be able to amplify frameworks that better represent culture from here. But we think of this also, local level. Even local is complex. Like Hong Kong is not just one block. There are the diaspora. There is also new territories which have their own kind of concerns. Hong Kong Island, Kowloon, and I think that's something that's also needs more nuance and then to kind of transmit from outside as well.
Yeah, and what impressed me with the Parasite as a non-profit art institution is it was an artist-found space. But since in 2025, I think, when Tobias Berger took the role of the director, it has become a curator-led non-profit space. So I think curating is a really important part in the strategy and approach in Parasite. And when I really curious about how does the collaboration between Parasite and Art Basel Hong Kong started, and what is the ideas behind your curatorial approach to the film section this year. Yeah.
Thanks so much for also drawing to this trajectory that we've been on as well. So as you mentioned, we've been artist-led, artist-centric. I think that has still been at the core for us as well. Without, we don't have any of this, in terms of Art Basel or galleries and museums if we don't have artists and artwork happening. So we're unique because we have evolved from a grassroots level into something now in terms of a mid-scale institution that's able to also collaborate with partners around the world. We can loan from museums and so forth. We've gone so far in this kind of 30-year period. And as you mentioned, there has been a shift from artist-led to curatorial-driven. And what has that mean? It's also because, in a way, as the ecosystem has kind of developed, there has been a pressing need for mediators, for people to contextualize, and again, it goes back to this idea of frameworks that represent the value of culture being made here. So we've also been at the forefront of that as well. So when the invitation of Art Basel came along, and it's an unconventional, I'd say, invitation to ask. Not normally, it would typically be an invitation for an individual to be the leader of a sector and to guide that through their curatorial vision. Invited for the first time in the organization was an interesting proposal for us. Shall I talk a bit more about this?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Yes,
sure. So I think it's an interesting proposal for us because I think, we are fluid in terms of being collective, being an organization. It's not an invitation for an individual. And so we wanted to embrace that in terms of a collaborative ethos. And so we've also worked with adjacent partners, also representing moving image from other perspectives. Within our own organization, we have a very talented team of curators. So with myself included, we were 4 people. And there were all these voices to kind of take moving image. It's also an intersection between cinema, filmmakers in general, artists. Some artists are full-time into moving image, others it's kind of relational to a wider practice. So we can take all these different perspectives, embrace that, and I think it's almost closer. I kind of use the idea that it's almost like a film festival. And the film festival is an ecosystem as well. It's not just about visibility. And so we want to kind of have a wider activation. And Parasite, I guess in its name, is it's kind of infiltrating something from within, being able to kind of re-engineer things for a new purpose. And I think that's also a little bit of our approach as well. It's the fair context. Normally there's lots of transactions. It's quite hard to kind of immerse yourself in some artworks fully because of constriction of space. But we have this auditorium. It can transport you to different historical periods, geographies, and I think again that's kind of what we're doing, and we find that very exciting.
I think you mentioned about the different spots, the connectedness is also something really interesting to me, because I think curating is also connecting different resources, and also the connectedness between the different elements in the art ecosystem in Hong Kong is really illuminating for me. I think, for example, Parasite as a non-profit space, your board members include lots of most experienced and influential people in the art system. So what roles do they play to ensure the sustainability of Parasite as a non-profit art space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really beautiful about this evolution is that, I mean, I think of myself, I mean, I am the executive director, but more and more I think of myself as a custodian. You know, Parasite is interesting because it has this grassroots background. As its name suggests, it almost is like a decentralized concept of an organization. And what I mean by that is, you know, it didn't start with, you know, the vision from a kind of blueprint that's based on a fixed architecture, a fixed place. It's evolved as the city has evolved as well. And those needs, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, with the city has also evolved, and we've always wanted to have the flexibility to respond to that. And as we've grown larger as an organization, as we've received funding from different sources, it's so important to have that accountability. And so maybe that idea of decentralized is not like the director is the definitive person, you know. I am accountable to the board, and the board represent the best interests of our city. They're experts, perhaps from the commercial side, from a patronage side. Also, it includes artists, and that's fundamental as well for us, as well as to ensure we have that representation. So whenever we go through different crossroads of our evolution, you know, there are always going to be different kind of difficult decisions to have, different interesting new sets of challenges, and it's that collective voice and that collective wisdom that always brings us through, and we've always done that, which is really exciting.
I think when you talk about this collaboration, it's really fascinating to me. For example, when we talk about yesterday, lots of people see that there is a liveliness compared to last year, but I think it's with Annie just now, we also talk about the craziness of the market before the pandemic. I think this kind of liveliness this year is different from the craziness. It's not kind of automatic generated. It's really, I can really see there is calmness, like with a deep understanding of the reality of the economy and the market. They have a calmness that everyone collaborating to make this kind of like. The efforts come into effect. I have that kind of feeling.
I mean, I guess full disclaimer is, you know, so I have a non-profit brain. So, you know, like I for me, when I kind of experience like the ebb and flow of like, you know, like something such as an art week or an art fair, you know, like it's always like, there's always these kind of counter perspectives, like this is more lively, this wasn't as it used to be, this thing sold, this thing didn't sell, and, you know, like I mean, generally speaking, like I have, with my non-profit brain, I mean, you know, another disclaimer perhaps is I have worked in other sectors before, so I'm not completely kind of, you know, unaware of this as well. But I feel like the baseline or undercurrent of things, like fundamentals, you know, like people have been looking within the region whether there's a possibility of something elsewhere. The brain in me, like this like kind of collaborative and kind of non-profit side of me thinks the more multipolar it is, the more diverse we have centers. It's not zero sum, it's kind of win-win for all of us. Hong Kong though has so much there for it as a city that, I mean, I came from Shanghai and Beijing. I arrived here because it's really impressive how robust and how diverse the infrastructure we have. Like we have a pioneering new museum focused on contemporary art and collecting with the values of this region. You know, Asia Arts Archive. It's so precious to have that here, you know, and to have an ecosystem to be able to support such an organization as this. That is very forward thinking. We have Parasite and Tycoon and Chat, you know, and then you have, actually when I joined, I was so surprised to see so many activities and exhibitions initiated by a new generation. And I think that is a big sign of a vibrant ecosystem, is when you have this kind of replenished energy that comes from a younger generation, and there's space for that and enough energy for this as well.
And some people talking about their concern about the cultural policy and the and the economical environment. What would that bring to the local art system? But this year I feel I heard less about the doom narrative, the anxiety last year, but still some concerns on the cultural policy and the economical environment. Is this a concern for you as the director of a non-profit space here? Yeah.
I mean, I think as you mentioned, I think this is a sentiment that most people feel. I mean, it's less of an anxiety, I would say. I think it's really something where, it's the world seems so complicated, and we're seeing actually more difficulties elsewhere. In fact, I feel like within each community, there will be moments of certain challenges, and how to persevere and endure. I would just say simply, I guess, one thing. I mean, it's also something I experienced a lot during COVID, when we had a lot of isolation. Being a curator, being an organization, I think it's really crucial to have bridges. So when the world feels really polarized, we need new bridges for exchanges. The exchange helps to replenish each place, because we learn from one another, we have more common understanding, and we understand more about other possibilities of expression. So I mean, from here, for example, I think a lot of the difficulty came from COVID kind of related kind of isolation as well. And we had a responsibility as an organization to kind of find pathways to initiate these, for that kind of wider role of a bridge, as I mentioned. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. I think because we both mentioned that we are in a very special moment now for the art world and in the history, but we don't know how long this special moment will last. But I know next year will be the 30 years anniversary of Parasite in this special moment. And what celebrations or special events can we expect?
Yeah, I mean, it's really it's really something. It's a huge milestone, 30 years. And I think, I guess it related a bit to your earlier question. 96 was also a moment of uncertainty. Of the unknown, and really some things we cannot have answers for in that immediate present. But what was why Parasite, I think, is so well loved and so cherished is it's always held itself and made itself open and available as a platform for each person to really kind of respond to these moments of the here and the now. So it's less so. I think it's better for an organization to ask questions that haven't been asked, to think in another way, to give space for that, and to invent new spaces for this. It's harder for us to say in a definitive way answers. Going back to the idea of a 30th anniversary, it's a really beautiful moment for us, because we're looking at our evolution as well. We mentioned very, very briefly about artist-led to curator-driven. I'm looking at how to think more holistically about this, rather than again it's a binary between either artists or curators. The fact that we do have this floor, it sets, it gives a clue for our audience and our supporters and future collaborators about what we have in store, which is thinking in different scales of support, different conversations, different projects that we can do. There will be these kind of statement group shows, as well as kind of new commissions that require much more intimate connection with artists. And with the 30th anniversary, I think that would be a follow-on as well to activate this idea of support more broadly around the city, to celebrate this moment together with different communities as well. Similar to what we're doing with film sector, where we're working with Nowness and Videotage, for example. We very much kind of enjoy this kind of way of really being part of the city and activating a lot of collaborations.
I will look forward to more meaningful dialogues and initiatives.
Thank you.
Next year.
Thank you so much.
We will come back. Yeah, and thank you so much, Billy, for joining us for the Baer Faxt Live. And that's the final session of the Baer Faxt Live from Hong Kong 2025. And thank you for watching it. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye.